Hey friends, tonight we're travelling back to a time of silk robes, whispered secrets, and absolutely no personal agency. A place where beauty was currency, power was fickle, and your job officially was to look pretty and not die of stress. Welcome to the delicate, excruciating world of the male concubine in ancient China. Before we surrender ourselves to palace politics and passive suffering, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Only if you enjoy this kind of gently horrifying bedtime history. Drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are and how long you think you'd last as a royal ornament with no rights and a killer skincare routine. Dim the lights, exhale slowly, and maybe put on a silk robe if you have one. It's time to glide quietly into a gilded nightmare. Congratulations! You've just been selected as a male concubine for the imperial court of ancient China. And no, that wasn't a career path you chose. It was chosen for you by fate, family pressure, or a passing official who thought your bone structure could land you next to a throne. You're not royalty. You're not quite a servant. You're something more decorative. A living accessory in the emperor's emotional jewelry box. Your job is to be soft, silent, and selectively visible, like a really anxious painting with opinions it's not allowed to express. Your name doesn't matter. That will be replaced shortly with a formal title, a rank, and possibly a nickname the eunuchs will use behind your back. Your past, erased. You may have been the bright son of a merchant, a scholar's apprentice, or the fourth boy in a farming family no one could afford to keep. But now, you're no one's son. You're the emperor's possession. A silk-wrapped secret tucked between 1,000 screens. You arrive at the palace in the early morning mist, escorted by men who don't smile and don't answer questions. You're dressed in your best robe, still threadbare compared to what you'll be wearing soon, and carrying nothing. Because from this moment on, nothing belongs to you. Not your thoughts, not your time, not even your eyebrows, if the current trend says to shave them. The gates are massive, red and gold, painted with symbols you vaguely recognise from temple scrolls, now looming like divine sarcasm. They open slowly, not for dramatic effect, but because everything in the palace moves at the speed of power, measured, deliberate, unbothered by your pulse. Inside, it's quiet, not peaceful, just calculated. The kind of silence that watches you. The guards don't look at you directly, but you feel examined anyway. Judged. Not for your soul or your virtue, but for your posture, your jawline, your ability to stand still without appearing defiant or dull. You're not a person in this place. You're potential. And potential is a dangerous thing. A eunuch greets you. He's wearing more silk than you've seen in your life, but none of it makes him look warm. His voice is flat, his face unreadable, and his first words are a measurement, your height, then your age, then your teeth. He notes them down like you're a horse being entered into a beauty contest where the prize is lifelong psychological erosion. You're led through corridor after corridor, each more ornate and soul-sucking than the last. Everything is painted, carved, embroidered. Dragons, cranes, lotuses, clouds, symbols of peace and power, swirling across walls while your nerves tap out Morse code against your ribs. The floor is polished stone, cold even through your slippers, and you realise with mild horror that there are no reflections allowed here. No mirrors, no shiny surfaces. You're meant to see only what you're told. Even your own face is not for you. Eventually, you're brought to your new room. It is not a cell. It is not a hovel. It is worse. It is beautiful. Painfully so. The bed is lacquered wood with inlaid jade. The blankets are silk, the air faintly scented with sandalwood. And yet, you feel more imprisoned than you've ever felt in your life. Because beauty in the palace is a cage. And cages this nice don't have exits. You're told to rest. You lie down, but sleep doesn't come. Instead the thoughts do, fast and loud. What happens now? Will you meet the Emperor today? Tomorrow? Never. Will you be touched, ignored, celebrated, forgotten? The possibilities rattle around your skull like dice, and every outcome feels somehow equally terrifying. Outside, the court hums. Not loudly, just enough for you to know that somewhere decisions are being made, alliances formed, punishments whispered. You're not part of those conversations. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You're in the waiting room of a system that runs on silence, secrets, and strictly measured smiles. You were brought here for your looks. That's not a compliment. That's a sentence. And somewhere deep down, you already know. You don't belong to yourself anymore. You try to sit still. You really do. But your knee won't stop twitching under the silk robe you were given. An itchy, oversized thing dyed a shade of green you suspect was meant to be calming, but mostly just reminds you of pond water. The eunuch told you not to wrinkle it. That was 4 hours ago. No one has come back. Not to check on you, not to give instructions, not even to say you've been forgotten. And so you sit, very still, like a beautiful statue in a museum no one visits. This is your first real lesson in the imperial court. Stillness is survival. Not calmness, not peace, stillness. A very specific type of controlled non-existence. You're allowed to be looked at, maybe spoken to. But unless you're explicitly told otherwise, you do not move. You do not ask. You do not exist unless summoned. Eventually someone knocks. Not a polite knock. A knock that says I outrank you before the door even opens. Another eunuch enters, slightly younger, slightly more tired. He doesn't introduce himself. He just stares at you for a full breath before making a soft tesk sound and telling you to follow him. You do, because the alternative is not an option. You're led to the bathing house. It's not what you expected. It's not indulgent. It's not even particularly private. It's clinical. Marble tubs lined up like livestock troughs, filled with steaming water and crushed flower petals that smell like the inside of an incense stick. You strip. Not because you want to, but because he's looking at you with the impatience of someone who's had to undress too many trembling new concubines and really just wants lunch. You step into the water and try not to scream as heat needles its way into your skin. Another attendant appears. Then 2 more. They descend on you without ceremony, scrubbing your arms, your back, behind your ears, between your toes. One of them trims your fingernails. Another scrapes your heels. You say nothing. They don't look you in the eye. They exfoliate you like you're a pear being prepared for a very judgmental feast. Hair is washed. Ears cleaned. Something is applied to your face that stings enough to make your vision blur, but no one seems concerned. You're instructed to rinse your mouth with a bitter tea that tastes like regret, soaked in pine needles. Supposedly, it freshens the breath. Mostly, it just makes you want to stop breathing altogether. You emerge clean, not refreshed, not reborn, just stripped. You're wrapped in a fresh robe, lighter, softer, unsettlingly transparent in the light, and led through another series of corridors. You try to keep track of where you are, but the palace is a maze built by people who hated maps and loved symmetry. You turn a corner and swear you've already been here, but the carpet's different, and the plants in the vases are wilting in a way that feels ominous. Finally, you're brought into a room with 3 other men. Concubines. They're older than you. Not much. Maybe a few years. Maybe 10. But they wear it like armour. An expression that says, "I've made it this far, and I dare you to ask me how." Or their robes are tighter, their hair shinier, their faces blank. Not empty. Just locked. One of them smiles at you. It's not friendly. It's a test. The kind of smile that requires a correct response, though you're not told what it is. You try to smile back. The man on the left exhales through his nose, just loud enough to remind you that was the wrong answer. You're told to sit. A 4th concubine enters. Taller, more ornate. His hair is woven with gold thread. His waist is cinched by a sash so elaborate it probably has diplomatic immunity. He looks at you the way a cat looks at a bug. It's considering not eating. Not out of mercy. Just boredom. He doesn't speak. He doesn't have to. The room adjusts to his presence like a candle does to wind, bending, flickering, aware. You realise, slowly, painfully, that this is your real orientation. Not the bath, not the eunuchs. This, the unspoken rules, the glances, the invisible chessboard you've just been dropped into, face down, with no pieces of your own. You're not part of a harem. You're part of a ranking system so intricate it makes the tax code look playful. Every gesture, every fold of cloth, every angle of your seated posture is a clue about where you stand. Or rather, where you're allowed to kneel. You're not told your rank. That would make it too easy. You'll find out in whispers, which teacup you're handed, in which seat you're given, in how long it takes someone to answer when you speak. And speaking, by the way, is already dangerous. Every word is a wager. Say too little, and you're forgettable. Say too much, and you're marked. Say the wrong thing to the wrong person, and you'll find yourself reassigned to the linen room faster than you can say unsuitable temperament. So you sit, still, silent, trying to look like you belong here, while doing absolutely nothing that might suggest you believe it. You learn fast. Because the palace doesn't wait for slow learners. It repurposes them. The lucky ones become anonymous servants. The unlucky ones, well, let's just say the koi ponds don't always reflect the moonlight. Sometimes they reflect a cautionary tale. Eventually, the taller concubine speaks. His voice is soft. Too soft. Like silk sliding over a knife. He asks your name. You answer. He repeats it once, as if tasting it. Then he gives you a new one. It's a single character. Something elegant, ambiguous, beautiful but not yours. It is now. He dismisses you with a wave that's halfway between a flick and a curse. You're led back to your room, if you can call it that. It's smaller than you remember, the air thicker. You lie on your untouched bed, heart still racing, body still tense, identity slowly dissolving under layers of protocol and perfume. You thought being chosen was the terrifying part, but now you understand. Being chosen was just the prologue. Night falls over the palace like a heavy silk curtain. Smooth, quiet, suffocating. Somewhere bells chime, not for you. They're for prayers or meals or the emperor's evening walk. Assuming he feels like walking. You don't know. You're not allowed to know. Your job is to exist invisibly until called. And if no one calls, you wait. If they do call, you obey. You lie in bed, eyes wide, listening. Not for danger, although that's always an option, but for hierarchy. The rustle of robes in the corridor, the click of a fan closing, the low murmur of names being spoken just out of earshot. In this place, power doesn't yell. It whispers. It taps softly on doors, then changes lives forever. Every breath you take feels like a negotiation. Too loud and you're arrogant. Too quiet and you're weak. You find yourself analysing how to inhale submissively, a talent no one mentioned in the selection process. Your mind drifts against your will back to before, back to when your name meant something, when you had a favourite dish, a family member who ruffled your hair too hard, a neighbourhood street with muddy corners and sun-warmed bricks. All of that is gone. Not metaphorically, gone. Your old life has been swallowed whole by the crimson belly of the Forbidden City, and it will not be burped back out. Not for birthdays, not for holidays, not even for grief. You hear footsteps, your heart stutters, they stop outside your door. Silence. A moment stretches like taffy, then they move on. You release your breath like it's expensive. You think you've been here 3 days, or 5. Time is conceptual now, measured in meals you didn't choose, silences you didn't break, and ceremonial brushes run through your hair by a eunuch who hasn't blinked since sunrise. There's a new robe waiting on a lacquered stand. This one is pale yellow, dangerously close to the Emperor's shade. You're terrified to wear it, but more terrified not to. It might be a test, or a trap, or an accidental laundry mix-up, which of course would still be your fault. You put it on. Another eunuch arrives. Not the silent one from yesterday, but his spiritual twin. You're told to present yourself in the Hall of Eternal Harmony. You nod, pretending you know where that is. You don't. He leads you. The halls are emptier now, quieter. The silence has changed. It's heavier, anticipatory. You pass under carved archways and alongside corridors of still water that reflect your own outline back at you like a ghost you haven't finished becoming. You're brought into a chamber that smells like warm incense and high expectations. A woman is seated near the centre. Not a concubine, not a servant. You assume she is someone terrifying. You are correct. She's the chief of the inner court. Her eyebrows are perfect. Her robe could bankrupt a province. She looks at you with the weary interest of someone who has seen 1,000 youths come and go, and remembers only the mistakes. She doesn't ask questions. She makes statements. You're presentable. You're not yet trained. You will not embarrass this court. Each phrase lands like a slipper made of stone. She explains what you are. Not a lover, not a partner. A symbol. A symbol of power, of refinement, of control over beauty itself. The Emperor collects perfection. You are now part of that collection. You will never age. You will never sweat. You will never speak out of turn or breathe with ambition. If you are summoned, you will go. If you are praised, you will demur. If you are touched, you will not react, except to glow modestly, like a jade ornament on a very complicated shelf. You nod. Or at least, you think you do. Your body no longer takes full orders from you. It's more of a diplomatic negotiation now, between fear and posture. She tells you the rules. There are so many rules. You cannot speak the Emperor's name. You cannot stand taller than his shadow. You cannot eat garlic. You cannot look directly at the Empress, but you also cannot look away too quickly or you'll seem guilty. You must never show teeth unless laughing, and only if someone of higher rank laughed first. You must not bleed where anyone can see it. You must not cry louder than the rain. You must not fall in love, especially not with him. Love is not part of the arrangement. Affection is dangerous. Desire is currency. Obsession is tolerated. From him, not from you. If the Emperor likes you, you may rise in rank, not in freedom. Never in freedom, just in furnishings. Your room will improve. Your meals will taste less like soft chalk. You'll be dressed more elaborately, spoken to more politely, envied more aggressively. But you will still be a concubine, a political garnish, a name murmured in dark corridors, followed by sighs, gossip, or envy, depending on how many nights you've been called to the imperial bed. And if he loses interest, you won't be told. The summons will simply stop. The attention will vanish. One day, your name won't appear on the silk roster. Your hair will still be combed, your robes still starched, but no one will be watching. You'll become a silent relic in a museum of the recently important. You may live like that for years. No one will say it, but they all know. The only thing more fragile than a concubine's dignity is his relevance. The chief of court dismisses you with a nod so small it may have been imagined. You're led back to your quarters. You don't cry. You can't. That was trained out of you, along with blinking too often and speaking above a whisper. You sit on your polished wooden bed and look at your hands. They're clean, soft, beautiful, in the way flowers are beautiful right before they're crushed and pressed into a book no one reads. This is who you are now. Not a boy, not a man, not a servant, not a noble. You are an idea, and ideas don't sleep well. The Forbidden City is enormous, but not in a comforting way. It's not a place where you stretch your arms and feel the thrill of possibility. It's not open, not free. It's large like an ocean is large when you've fallen overboard. You're surrounded by beauty, and you have no idea where the surface is. Everywhere you look, there's red lacquer, gold filigree, roof tiles shaped like dragon scales, columns carved with clouds, lotus petals, ancient beasts, and imperial thunder. Walls that seem to shimmer when you pass them, not because of the paint, but because you're constantly wondering who's behind them. You learn quickly that nothing here is built for your comfort. The doors are too tall, the halls are too quiet. The floor is always either too cold or too polished, like it's daring you to slip and disgrace yourself. You walk on it like it might snitch. Your room, if you can call it yours, is a box of contradictions. It's luxurious, but not welcoming. There are silks, cushions, polished bronze mirrors, but everything looks like it belongs to someone more important than you. Someone who might come back and ask what you're doing sitting there, even if they never do. Your bed is carved wood, more art than furniture. The mattress is stuffed with something expensive and deeply uncomfortable. The blankets are light as breath, heavy as guilt. You sleep under them like a man being buried in soft treasure. The windows are latticed, not with bars, no, nothing so crude, but with delicate wooden frameworks that obscure your view just enough to remind you you're not meant to see too far. You're allowed filtered light, soft shadows. Nothing direct. The palace doesn't like direct things. Outside, the garden is perfection. Trees trimmed with mathematical precision. Blossoms timed like theatre cues. Even the koi fish swim in elegant, choreographed spirals, as if they've rehearsed. The air smells like jasmine and old expectations. And yet you do not relax, because you are always being watched, not openly, that would be uncouth, but you feel it. The weight of eyes behind fans, behind doors, behind layers of courtly etiquette so thick they might as well be brick. Eunuchs whisper your name and stop when you get too close. Fellow concubines walk past you with the kind of indifference that's been honed into a weapon. There are guards, but they don't guard you. They guard the idea of order. You are not a threat. You are a variable. You begin to notice that even the layout of the palace conspires to disorient you. There are no straight lines. Every path bends. Every corridor loops. The walls curve in ways that don't match the map you've been forbidden to own. You think you're going to the Hall of Blossoming Virtue, but you end up near the Chamber of Auspicious Fragrance, which, despite the name, smells strongly of boiled cabbage and tension. You try to ask directions once. The eunuch just raises an eyebrow and says, "If you don't know your place, perhaps you haven't earned one yet." So you stop asking. You learn to listen instead. For the sounds that matter, the shuffle of silk slippers, the creak of a screen sliding open, the delicate ting of porcelain bowls being set down in the next room, the whispers, always the whispers. One day you hear your name, not your real name, the name they gave you, is spoken by someone outside your room, someone passing. A single word, soft, drawn out, then followed by laughter. You don't sleep that night, because the palace doesn't need to hurt you to control you. It just needs to let you imagine ways it might. Your schedule, if you can call it that, is inconsistent by design. Some days you're summoned at dawn for grooming. Other days you wait in silence until nightfall for a summons that never comes. Meals arrive on lacquered trays, sometimes hot, sometimes cold, never the same time twice. You don't know if that's the kitchen's fault or a lesson. Either way you eat quickly and without preference, because having favourites is dangerous. It gives people something to take away. The food is delicate, balanced, beautiful. You long for something that isn't perfect. Something ugly, something fried and oversalted and served in a cracked bowl by someone who couldn't care less what title you wear. But perfection is all that's offered here, and even that is rationed. You get just enough beauty to remind you what you'll never truly touch. You aren't allowed to leave the inner court. Not that you'd try. The gates are guarded. The routes are secret. The outer city might as well be on another planet. A peasant could walk past the palace walls every day of his life and never know your face. Just as well. You barely know it anymore. You pass mirrors, but they don't show you anything useful. Just a shape in expensive fabric. A ghost pretending to smile. You start to forget what you used to look like. What your voice used to sound like when you didn't choose each word, like a monk balancing sacred stones. There is a courtyard you're allowed to visit during designated hours. It has a plum tree, just one. They say the emperor liked it when he was young. Now, no one touches it. The tree is old, tired, beautiful in the way ruins are beautiful. You stare at it and wonder if it knows it's a metaphor. Sometimes you see the other concubines, the ones who've lasted. They float, not walk, float. Their hands never fidget. Their eyes never linger. Their faces have been trained into masks of passive allure. Gentle, curious, indifferent. They speak only when spoken to, and when they do, it's like poetry recited on a threat of exile. You try to copy them. You fail. Your eyebrows twitch. Your shoulders sag. Your voice betrays too much hope. You're too new, too loud, too real. Realness has no place here. You are coached quietly in the art of restraint. How to smile like you've just heard a flattering secret. How to cry without changing your face. How to sit with your knees at just the right angle even if it hurts. How to bow low enough to be respectful, but not low enough to be pathetic. Every gesture is a performance. Every breath an audition. You're always on stage, and the audience is invisible, but present, always present. You begin to understand the unspoken architecture of the palace. Not the buildings, the rules, the currents, the way information moves, sideways, never straight. The way attention works, sudden, dangerous, and almost never deserved. The way power feels, like silk gloves pressing softly around your throat. You walk past a wing of the palace you've never entered. You hear laughter, music, the tinkling of bracelets, and then a scream. Not loud, just sharp, quickly cut off. No one reacts. You do not ask. That night, your tea tastes sweeter than usual. You wonder if it's been altered. You drink it anyway. Because not drinking would be suspicious. And suspicion is more toxic than anything they could slip into a cup. The next morning, you find a single hairpin placed on your pillow. Jade and silver. Delicate, unmarked, you report it. The eunuch takes it, says nothing, and walks away. You never see it again. Later, one of the older concubines tells you offhandedly. Sometimes they test loyalty with beauty. You don't sleep for 2 days after that. Some mornings you wake up before the bells. Not because you're rested, because something in your brain has become alert to shifts in air pressure. You can tell when a eunuch is approaching by the temperature in the hallway. You can hear the difference between ceremonial footsteps and disciplinary ones. You've developed a sixth sense, not for danger, for hierarchy. Outside, the world moves. But inside the Forbidden City, movement is a sin unless done beautifully. If you drop something, you retrieve it with grace or not at all. If you sneeze, you apologize to the silence. If you yawn, you cover your mouth like you're hiding a crime. One of the younger concubines is punished for laughing during a poetry recitation. Not loudly, just too naturally. The chief attendant hears it. That night she is reassigned. The next morning her room is empty. The servants scrub it clean as if her very presence had been a mistake on the floor plan. No one mentions her again. Not because they're cruel, because the palace demands amnesia. Memory is a liability here. You're expected to forget what does not serve the emperor's image, and unfortunately, that includes most things. You learn this the hard way after asking about a room you passed the week before. A small antechamber, painted with gold cranes and a single open window that looked out over a garden no one ever visits. The eunuch looks at you for 3 full seconds before saying, "There is no room like that." You try to protest, gently. You describe the cranes, the lacquered bench. "There is no room like that," he repeats, slower now, firmer, final. You do not speak of it again. The next day, your route to morning instruction has changed. You never see that hallway again. You come to understand that the palace itself is an active participant in your undoing. It doesn't just contain your life, it edits it. Rooms vanish. Corridors are repurposed. People go missing. Not in the dramatic way, but in the polite administrative one, where names disappear from paper and no one files a complaint because there's no form for that. Even the seasons feel different here. You've stopped tracking them by the weather. Instead, you follow the shift in fragrance. When the tea is served with chrysanthemum, it's autumn. When the incense smells like plum, it's nearing winter. The windows are closed. The courtyard is dusted with frost. and you're given a new robe, lined in fur so soft it feels like an apology you didn't ask for. Your fingertips stay cold anyway. You're told you may visit the Hall of Literary Grace to observe the scholars. It's a privilege. You're not permitted to speak. You sit behind a carved screen, watching men discuss history, poetry, and diplomacy like none of it is absurd. You understand most of the words, but not the tone. There is a smugness to it, a confident ignorance that only the truly untouchable can afford. The scholars do not know your name. You are a ripple in the wallpaper, a painted ghost among many. They debate the moral purity of the classics, while your breath fogs on a pane of glass that separates you from a world that pretends it doesn't exploit beauty to keep itself amused. Back in your quarters, you are presented with a gift, a scroll, written in delicate calligraphy, extolling the virtues of patience and silence. There is no note, no sender, no signature. You hang it on the wall anyway. Everything in the palace arrives anonymously. Tea, news, warnings, affection. All of it wrapped in ceremony and plausible deniability. You cannot trace intentions. You can only endure them. You develop a ritual. Each night you brush your hair exactly 100 times, not because you believe in the superstition, but because it gives the hours shape. You fold your robe 3 ways. You set your slippers precisely beneath the bed, facing out. If something is misaligned the next morning, you know someone's entered your room. You've never caught anyone, but the fear remains. One morning your comb is missing. Nothing else is touched, just that. You spend the day pretending not to notice, even as your scalp itches from nerves. It is returned 3 days later, placed exactly where it was, cleaned, polished. You say nothing. This is the game. The light in the palace changes depending on who is in favour. Not metaphorically, literally. Rooms are more brightly lit when someone important is expected. Your hallway, once warm with lantern glow, is now dim. Not dark. Just less relevant. You are learning the slow, exquisite ache of imperial neglect. It doesn't arrive as punishment. It arrives as silence, as tepid tea, as your name pronounced incorrectly by someone who used to bow. You long for a summons, not because you want to see him, but because the absence is starting to feel personal. You wonder if you said something wrong, stood incorrectly, if your voice is too high, too low, if you bowed too deeply, not deeply enough. You ask a senior concubine for advice. He laughs, not cruelly, just sadly, and says, "The emperor doesn't forget. He simply rearranges his priorities." You thank him. That night you try to cry, but even your tears feel too loud. You stop measuring days by meals. Meals are inconsistent anyway. Sometimes they arrive with soft buns, duck broth, and sliced pears so perfect they look unreal. Other days it's boiled rice and silence. No tray, no knock. Just a eunuch gliding past your doorway with a neutral expression and no explanation. Instead, you measure time by the shadows. There's a particular column near your courtyard, one that casts a crooked line onto the tiles when the sun hits it just right. When the shadow reaches the second crack, it's late morning. When it reaches the moss line, you've missed the midday bell. When it disappears altogether, you steel yourself for another sleepless night of pretending not to count your own heartbeats. This is how you live now, not by time, by pattern. You begin to notice other patterns, the flower arrangements, for example. Peonies mean favour is shifting. Orchids suggest someone has died. If you see plum blossoms before New Year, Someone powerful is being quietly reminded of humility. You don't know who arranges them, they just appear, perfect, whispering. The palace speaks in petals. You've just learned to listen. Even the birds are part of the system. Caged finches hang from the eaves near the southern corridor. You used to think they were for beauty. You were wrong, they are alarms. If one cage is empty, it means a noble is coming. If two, a consort. If three, the emperor himself is approaching. One morning, all the cages are gone. You brace yourself, nothing happens. And that is the most terrifying part. Your slippers wear out in strange ways. Not from walking. You don't walk far. You're not allowed to. But from pacing. From standing too still. From shifting weight without actually going anywhere. The soles fray around the edges. Soft evidence of a body trying to move in a life designed to keep it motionless. You are taken to a pavilion near the library. It is beautiful, which should be your first warning. Beauty in a palace is always double-edged. A man in fine robes is there, an artist. He doesn't speak to you. He just gestures for you to sit. You do. He paints you, not as you are. As you are instructed to look, composed, serene, utterly forgettable. The kind of face that could be printed on silk screens and sold as the idea of obedience. When he finishes, you glance at the portrait. The face is yours, but not really. It is smoother, paler, more compliant. A version of you edited for imperial consumption. You are thanked for your time. The scroll is rolled up and taken away. You are not told where it goes. Days later, a eunuch mentions your image has been hung in one of the emperor's private halls. He says it casually, like he's describing weather. Then he tells you to return to your quarters. You do. Slowly. Carefully. You do not know what this means. Favour? Danger? Decoration? In the Forbidden City, those are often the same thing. That night there's a sound outside your window. You open the lattice just slightly. Moonlight falls across the courtyard. A concubine is being escorted somewhere. You can't see who it is. Only their silhouette, floating like sorrow down a polished stone path. The eunuch walking beside them doesn't speak. The guards don't follow. You close the window. You pretend you didn't see. You are learning. The walls in your room are papered in silk. At night, when the lanterns burn low, the patterns shift. What used to be cranes become demons. What looked like water begins to flicker like fire. You know it's just the fabric. But after weeks without real sleep, your brain no longer accepts logic as an authority. You wake from dreams you didn't authorize. Dreams where you're walking the corridors naked while the emperor watches silently from a distant platform. Dreams where your own name echoes back at you in someone else's voice. Dreams where your reflection shakes its head at you, slowly, disapprovingly, before turning to walk away without you. You keep these dreams to yourself. Everyone dreams here. No one admits it. You're summoned again. Not to the emperor, to the Department of Rights. You're escorted through unfamiliar halls, across a bridge with dragon finials, into a courtyard ringed by low black pines. A man in crimson robes is waiting. He does not smile. He tells you to kneel. You do. He explains that you are to begin etiquette review. Apparently, someone observed your posture while bowing last week and found it emotionally inconsistent. You want to ask what that means. You don't. He shows you a diagram instead, of a figure bowing at precisely 27 degrees. You practice for hours. Your knees ache, your back spasms. You learn to smile while holding a position so unnatural it makes your lungs whisper threats. The instructor nods once, very slightly. That's your reward. You're dismissed with a scroll of posture diagrams and a cup of warm chrysanthemum tea that tastes faintly of chalk and disappointment. You walk back to your room with slower steps. The palace punishes speed. It interprets urgency as guilt. Later, a younger concubine whispers that someone was demoted last month for walking too quickly near the Empress's quarters. Not running, just with intention. He's now polishing lions on the roof, alone, with no shade. Your shadow falls on the floor next to a painted screen. It's long, stretched, faint. You realise you haven't felt like a person in weeks. Just a collection of gestures in human form. You write a poem, silently, in your head. You can't write it down. Paper is monitored. Ink is rationed. Thoughts are a risk. But the words stay with you. I am not a voice. I am the pause after one. A sleeve folded wrong. A breath held too long. A ghost made polite. You whisper it to yourself before bed, like a prayer to a god who only accepts meter and silence. That night there is music. Far away, but close enough to make your stomach tighten. Drums, flutes, laughter, measured and feminine. A celebration. You're not invited? You stand at your window and watch the lanterns float past, each one a tiny sun, bobbing through the corridors like fireflies with agendas. You think about how easy it would be to follow them, to step out, to be seen, but you don't. You close the window. You bow to the emptiness. You sit. You drink your tea. You wait. Because here, existence is performance, and you are not done rehearsing. You rise before the sun, not because anyone told you to, but because by the time they tell you, it's already too late. In the Forbidden City, being on time is equivalent to being slightly late, and being late is an insult so grave it echoes. Not out loud is for peasants, but through looks, omissions, and elegantly sharpened metaphors delivered over steamed buns. Your day begins with presentation. Not meditation, not prayer, not even breakfast. First comes the visual audit. Skin, robe, hair, posture. You are the human version of a scroll someone forgot to hang properly. One crease, one crooked fold, and suddenly you're being whispered about by people who speak exclusively in compliments that are legally indistinguishable from threats. The eunuchs arrive just after dawn. They carry water, robes, herbal rinses, and a clipboard. Not an actual clipboard, that would be too modern, but something older, more ceremonial. A carved tablet covered in elegant judgment. They don't greet you. They inspect you. There is no privacy in the Forbidden City. Not for you. Your body is not sacred. It is public property that no one will admit they own. You're bathed. You're dressed. You're oiled with something that smells like camphor and barely contain disappointment. Your hair is brushed, not gently, into a style that took 6 dynasties to standardize. You're told to sit, then to stand, then to sit again with more purpose. You do it all, silently, precisely, gratefully. Gratitude is not optional. Even when you're too tired to feel it, you're required to perform it. After you're declared passable, never perfect, never excellent, only acceptable for public consumption, you're taken to the instruction hall. Because yes, you still require training, even now. Your beauty may have bought your way in, but it's compliance that keeps you here. You are taught the proper method of entering a room. Left foot first, eyes downward, shoulders soft but not loose. You must bow with sincerity but not desperation. You must speak clearly, but only in tones softer than a whisper and firmer than a breath. Too quiet, you're suspicious. Too loud, you're vulgar. Too confident, you're dangerous. You practice walking for 3 hours. Not pacing, not strolling. Walking. Down a polished corridor with a beanbag balanced on your head. No, not a fun beanbag. A weighted silk pouch filled with small stones and imperial expectations. You are expected to keep it in place. You are expected to do it with grace. You are expected not to sweat. If you sweat, you're dabbed dry. Not gently, but with the indifference of someone cleaning an expensive vase they didn't choose. After the walk comes calligraphy. You're told it is a form of refinement. It is not. It is a form of punishment disguised as prestige. You're handed a brush and instructed to copy a poem about virtue until your wrist cramps. The ink runs dry halfway through the 3rd line. You're not given more ink. You're expected to manifest elegance through restraint. You do not ask what that means. You just press harder. By the 5th repetition, your fingers are stained, and your characters look like they've been drawn by someone falling down a flight of stairs. The instructor sighs. You're told to begin again. There is no lunch break. There is only tea, warm, bitter, served in a cup that must be held with both hands, 3 fingers under the base, thumb on the rim, pinky restrained. You once held it incorrectly. You were corrected with a single phrase. So clumsy, one might mistake you for a scholar. You still think about that. After tea, it's music. You are presented with an instrument, sometimes a guqin, sometimes a flute, and told to play. You're not expected to be good. You're expected to be aesthetic. That's the word they use. Not talented, not skilled. Aesthetic, which means don't offend the wallpaper. You pluck strings softly. You blow air through ancient reeds. You hum in a key you don't understand, hoping it sounds enough like sadness to pass. Because here, everything you do must be beautiful, but never so beautiful that it outshines the emperor's attention. Even your artistry has a ceiling. Sometimes you're summoned to perform for visiting officials. Not alone, in a group. A line of concubines holding silk fans and hollow smiles, performing a piece choreographed by someone who's never been touched and deeply resents it. You move slowly, elegantly, exactly, and you are watched, not admired, watched, evaluated, ranked, stored in memory for future use or dismissal. If you're lucky, no one notices you. If you're very lucky, someone does, and decides you're worth something more than idle commentary. That's rare. Usually, you're applauded with the same enthusiasm one reserves for furniture that didn't creak during a dinner party. You return to your quarters, exhausted. Not physically, not really. The real exhaustion is existential. It's the weight of being beautiful all day, of holding in your stomach, of tilting your head at just the right angle, of making eye contact for exactly 2 seconds, then lowering your gaze in a way that suggests submission, not stupidity. Every moment is labour. Every second is a choice between being seen, being used, or being replaced. And all 3 options feel the same after a while. You lie on your bed, limbs too tense to stretch. Your robe is still perfect. Your posture still flawless. Your soul threadbare. There is no applause, no acknowledgement. Just a room full of silence and things you're not allowed to touch. A vase worth more than your family's home. A scroll written by a dead poet who died happier than you'll ever be. A bowl of fruit that's already been inspected, blessed and arranged, purely for display. You're not hungry. You're not full. You're something in between. Something hollow. You've never missed doing nothing this much in your life. You remember vaguely what it was like to be bored, to fidget, to slouch, to laugh without needing permission. Those things are gone now. Not stolen. Traded for what? A title. A room. A robe. A chance to be looked at by a man who may never remember your name, but will absolutely remember if your knees creaked when you bowed. Afternoons are for refinement. That's the official word. You begin to suspect it's a mistranslation of wearing down the human spirit until it's glossy and complaint-proof. The afternoon begins with gesture training. That's not a joke. You're taught how to gesture. Not wave, not beckon. Gesture. A court instructor who wears so much powdered silk on his robe he leaves a fog trail when he walks, stands in front of you and demonstrates how to extend your hand in a way that suggests modest willingness, not enthusiasm. Then how to accept a gift. Not like you want it. Like you're honoured but slightly surprised. The emotional equivalent of trying not to show teeth while receiving poison. You repeat the gestures, again and again and again. You're corrected for being too fluid, then for being too stiff, then for having fingers that suggest anxiety. You didn't know fingers could do that. Now you do. You are told to express gratitude through elbow placement. You do your best. Later, you are brought to the mirror room. That's not what they call it, but it's what it is. A long chamber with a polished bronze wall, warped just slightly, as if even the palace can't look at itself directly. You are told to practice your face, your resting expression specifically. It must be calm, but not cold warm, but not inviting neutral, but slightly amused alert, but not tense. And under no circumstances may it reveal any of your actual feelings. You try several combinations. The eunuch watching you makes a note. You don't know what it says. You never know what they write down. It could be excellent poise, or likely to snap during rainy season. Both are equally probable. After expression training, you're sent to scenting, not bathing. That was this morning. This is separate. You're stripped down and re-scented with oils and powders based on your designated temperament. Not your actual temperament. The one they've assigned to you, based on your room location, star chart, and an imperial chart last updated 2 dynasties ago. Today, your scent is peaceful chrysanthemum with undertones of obedient willow. You don't know what that means, but you're expected to embody it. The eunuch tells you not to sweat. Again, sweating implies struggle, and the only thing less attractive than a struggling concubine is one who lets people know he's struggling. You are powdered into submission, dusted into beauty, polished into compliance. By now, you've stopped reacting to fingers on your neck, to being undressed and redressed like a ceremonial weapon, to the eyes that skim your ribs and mark your waistline like measurements on a fragile vase. You're not numb, you're just well practiced. Somewhere between the 4th oil and the 2nd hairpin, you stop remembering how to stand naturally. You're released for what is generously referred to as free time. You know better. Free time is a trap. No one wants to see a concubine idle. Idleness implies you're not in demand. Or worse, that you think you're allowed to rest. That you're content. Contentment is dangerous here. So instead, you read. Books on etiquette. Poems about longing. Manuals on ceremonial tea pouring. You study brush strokes and plant names and the correct names for different folds of curtain silk. You learn. Always. Forever. because learning keeps you controlled. You once tried to nap during free time. That was a mistake. A eunuch passed your doorway, saw you reclined, and 2 hours later you were given a lecture on complacency signalling. You didn't know your eyelids were sending messages. Now you do. Later, you attend a grooming review. This is not about your grooming. This is about your ability to watch someone else be groomed and nod with courtly approval. Yes, that's real. A senior concubine is dressed, powdered and styled in front of the group. Your job is to observe how he carries himself, how his hair is shaped, how his eyes stay on the floor, even while receiving compliments. You're expected to compliment him too, but not too much. Too much flattery implies insincerity. Too little, and you appear jealous. You must compliment with precision, as if describing a flower you like but could absolutely live without. You say something about the lustre of his robe. Someone behind you coughs. Wrong choice. You should have complimented his restraint, not the robe. Robes are replaceable. Self-effacement is currency. You go to bed with your head full of silent rules and unsentenced corrections. No one scolds you outright. That's not how this works. You are corrected through exclusion, through glances, through the subtle, excruciating silence that follows when someone else is praised. And you are not. The next day, you are asked to join a lotus folding session. Decorative, symbolic, completely unnecessary. You spend 2 hours folding fabric petals with trembling fingers, while the concubine beside you recounts a story of how one woman once folded so poorly, her entire family lost rank. You nod and fold more carefully. By the end of the session, your fingers are raw and your petal looks like it's apologising for existing. You're told it is passable. You bow, deeply. Every day ends the same way: quiet tea, a silk robe, a lingering question in your mind. Not about escape, not anymore, but about whether you're being noticed for the right things, or noticed at all. In your dreams, you fold lotuses with your teeth. You wake up mid-bow. You go back to sleep with your hand still posed. Evening begins not with rest, but with preparation for rest. You're not allowed to simply sleep. That would be undignified. First, your robe is changed. Again. Something looser, softer, still embroidered with enough symbolism to launch a philosophical debate. A crane for longevity, a moon for grace, a willow branch, again, for obedience. Always obedience. You sit on a low cushion while an attendant massages your hands. Not for pleasure, for circulation. The emperor dislikes cold fingers. You may never touch him. You may never be summoned. But should it happen, should you be chosen, your fingers must not tremble with poor blood flow or unresolved personal trauma. You're told to soak your feet in warm rosewater. The bowl is porcelain, trimmed with dragons. You imagine smashing it, not out of rage, just to feel something unpredictable. You don't, of course. You place your feet in slowly, obediently. You do everything slowly now, not because you want to, because the palace has trained your speed into submission. You're a man of patience, of grace, of perpetual performance. Tonight, you will attend a poetry recital. No, you won't be reciting. You're not important enough for that. You'll be seated 2 cushions from the back, behind someone who used to be favoured and now speaks exclusively in bird metaphors. You'll sip tea. You'll nod at the proper verses. You'll laugh once, lightly, when the emperor does, even if you didn't hear the line. You'll do all of this flawlessly, because it's not about enjoying the poetry. It's about being seen enjoying it in exactly the right measure. Too delighted, and you're a fool. Too serious, and you're brooding. Perfect court presence is a facial expression that says, "This is the highlight of my week, and yet I could vanish mid-stanza and never disturb the rhythm of the room." The recital goes long. You shift your knees. Quietly, slowly, with the shame of a man who knows he's drawing attention to his own skeleton. A eunuch makes eye contact. You freeze, hold still. He walks past you, says nothing. You still can't breathe for another full minute. By the time you return to your quarters, your back feels like it belongs to someone 3 decades older. You peel off your robe like it's made of thorns. You stare at your reflection in the polished bronze mirror and see someone who looks elegant, composed, hollow. This is the face you have earned, the kind that disappears with dignity. You sit at your desk, a gift, lacquered wood, gold leaf in the corners. You're not allowed to write in your own voice, but you're allowed to practice calligraphy, so long as it's classical. No personal essays, no complaints, just quotes from dead scholars who believed suffering made men wise. You copy their wisdom onto rice paper, stroke by stroke, all of it perfectly legible. None of it true. You think about the eunuch who scolded you last week. Not harshly, just enough. Enough to remind you that your hands still shake when someone whispers your name with the wrong tone. You think about the concubine 2 doors down, the one who used to braid your hair when no one was looking. You haven't seen him in days. His room is dark. The attendants say nothing. You say nothing. You've learned. Learning is survival, but it costs you. The cost is this. You now flinch when someone touches your shoulder too gently. You miss being told what to do in a normal voice. You fantasize about being yelled at, just once. Something real, something human. Instead you get nods. Small, endless nods. Nods that carry the weight of exile. Nods that say, "You're still here, but barely." You fall asleep with your eyes open, not literally, but in the way that people who have been watched too long forget how to blink without permission. Your dreams are simple now. You dream of doing nothing without consequence. Sitting, lying down, speaking with your real voice, laughing until you cry, crying until you're not corrected for it. You dream of walking into a room without arranging your facial muscles first, of breathing deeply in a space that doesn't require approval, of saying no. But even in dreams, the word sticks in your throat. Because here, no is not a word. It's a verdict. You wake up to incense, the same smell as always. A reminder that every day in the Forbidden City begins with ritual, and every ritual begins with forgetting who you were before. You sit up, straighten your robe, open the window 1 inch, just enough to feel the morning air, but not enough to suggest defiance. The sky is pink, your fingers are pale, and your life, your entire life, is a performance so refined it's starting to convince even you. You're not alone in the palace. You know that obviously. You see others, concubines, eunuchs, servants, handlers, priests, guards. But you're not just not alone. You're deliberately placed in an invisible structure. A hierarchy so rigid, so intricate, so profoundly silent, it could only have been designed by people who hated democracy and loved embroidery. Your official rank is 3rd tier male companion, subdivision plum. That sounds dignified. It's not. It means you're decorative, optional. 1 step above a gift basket, 1 step below a concubine whose name is occasionally remembered on feast days. You are the court equivalent of a soft piano note played when a more important person is walking by. But even this role, this decorative, breathless limbo, is a privilege, because beneath you are the lower tiers, the newcomers, the ones still referred to by their province of origin instead of their assigned names. That boy from Sichuan, the thin one from Henan, the one with too many teeth. They're not cruel, not all of them, but cruelty is part of the system, whether you enact it or simply carry it in your posture. You've been trained to bow slightly shallower when you pass them, to accept their lowered gaze as your due, to nod when they press themselves against walls to let you pass. It's not vanity, it's protocol. Everyone knows who's above whom. No one talks about it, except in smiles, except in absence, except in the way no one stands beside the first-rank companion unless summoned to do so. He's not a man. He's a title wrapped in silk. He moves like he's walking underwater. He has never been corrected in public. His robes have 7 layers. His voice sounds like a lullaby composed by someone with no intention of letting you sleep. You once bowed too slowly when he entered a corridor. You weren't scolded. You were repositioned. Your seat at meals moved half a cushion to the left. No one said anything. They didn't need to. A repositioning is worse than a reprimand. Reprimands suggest hope. A repositioning suggests you're becoming invisible. You learned. There are 10 ranks, each with internal subdivisions. The distinctions are microscopic. Who gets the larger basin of water in the morning? Who gets fruit that hasn't already softened? Who's allowed to use a specific type of hair oil? You spend entire afternoons wondering if you're allowed to request a new comb, or if that's something only second tiers can do. You don't ask. You observe. You make charts in your head. The concubine with the blue robe and peacock embroidery bowed first yesterday, but received tea second. That means he was outranked by the older one in white. The white-robed one used a seal on his letter. Seals are only given to 5th rank and above. But the blue one was seated closest to the incense burner. Is that preference or punishment? Every day is a logic puzzle with no rules, no answers, and eternal consequences. And within this hierarchy, the real sport isn't rising. It's watching others fall. No one says this out loud, but it's true. You see it in their faces. The soft flicker of satisfaction when someone is left out of a procession. The sideways glance when a robe is revealed to have a tear. The exaggerated compliments. "Oh, your voice is so bold today," which you now know is a death sentence dressed in silk. You receive one of those compliments after humming during breakfast. A week later, you're invited to a recitation session and made to stand while others sit. No explanation, no correction. Just a spotlight that says, "We see you, and you are not us, you endure it." Because to protest would be vulgar. Worse, it would make things obvious. And the palace hates nothing more than the obvious. Even your shame must be elegant. The humiliation isn't always direct. Sometimes it's passive, systemic. Like the day your slippers go missing, and you are forced to appear late to a lantern lighting with bare feet. You're not punished for being late. That would be too kind. Instead, you're simply not acknowledged at all. The Emperor glances across the room, and then looks past you, as though counting ghosts. That hurts more than any slap ever could. Later you find your slippers beneath a folded blanket in a storage room no one uses. You do not report it. You are learning. The first-rank companion once dropped his fan. It was silent. It barely made a sound. But every head turned. Every breath stopped. And the nearest eunuch dropped to his knees and retrieved it like it was a divine artifact. You once dropped a bowl. It shattered. No one looked up. The shards were swept away without comment. That was 3 months ago. You still hear the sound. There are official duties tied to rank. The higher your position, the more responsibility you're given, though responsibility in the Forbidden City means increased opportunities to fail publicly. First rank manages the ceremonial events. Second rank attends to private messages. Third rank helps with the presentation of seasonal offerings. 10th rank pours the wine and disappears. You're somewhere in the middle, visible, but not memorable. The worst place to be. High enough to be scrutinized, low enough to be dispensable. You have witnessed 3 demotions. No one explains them. No one even confirms they've happened. You just notice one day that someone who used to sit across from you is now refilling tea from behind a curtain. They smile when they see you. It's a smile you will never forget, because it is not bitter, it is apologetic, as if they failed not only themselves, but you. And you smile back, because anything else would be cruel. You begin to understand that hierarchy is not just enforced from above, it is fed from below. Everyone polices each other. Everyone is complicit, because the only thing worse than watching someone rise is knowing it wasn't you. By the end of your 3rd month, you know how to walk behind someone without seeming resentful. You know how to accept praise so subtly that it doesn't look like ambition. You know how to receive criticism like a folded fan, gracefully, silently, even as it opens up just enough to slice. Most importantly, you know when to look down. Looking down is a skill. It says, I recognize your superiority. I accept my place. I will not challenge the choreography of power that surrounds you like incense, smoke and silk. But looking down too fast, that's defeat. Too slow? Defiance? Too often? Desperation? You time your humility like a mathematician arranging flowers. It has to be beautiful, forgettable and accurate. The problem is, no one tells you when you get it right. They only tell you when you're falling behind. And even then, not directly. Once, you were passed over during a mid-season gift distribution. Everyone received a sachet of amber incense, tied with a red string. Yours was tied with brown. No one said anything, which made it so much worse. You still have that sachet. You keep it hidden in a drawer, where it poisons the air around it like a quiet reminder that you are not quite enough. The hierarchy in the palace is less like a ladder, more like a mirror maze. You can see other versions of yourself, higher, better, adorned in gold, but you can never quite reach them. You take a step, and the reflection moves. A shadow nods, a title shifts, a robe rustles. You're always close, but never quite the one they bow to. And that's the cruelty of proximity. The ones above you are not far away. They eat with you, walk past you, sometimes even speak your name with soft detachment, like they're practicing a phrase they might one day need to forget. You think of one in particular, a second tier named Ren. He is flawless in the most exhausting way. Every gesture from him is a masterclass in softness. His posture is a vertical poem. He eats without making a sound. He never rushes, not even when he's late, because he's never really late. People wait for him. Time adjusts to his presence. Ren once complimented your kneeling posture. Took one sentence. You thought about it for a week. You still think about it. You started practicing that same kneel every night before bed, hoping the next time he passed, he might say something else. Something small, something that sounded like acknowledgement. He never did. You suspect he doesn't remember. Or worse, that he does, and chose silence anyway. That's the palace for you. Praise is a whisper. Humiliation is a group project. Take the laundry incident. You didn't see it coming. You simply found your underrobe missing, replaced by one a size too small. When you mentioned it, gently, you were told your figure must be changing, that you were growing wider. The words were said kindly, too kindly. They weren't about the robe, they were about your status. Later that week, during a formal greeting, one of the concubines passed behind you and let out a sound. Not quite a laugh, not quite a cough. Something in between. Just loud enough to be heard. Just ambiguous enough to deny. You looked up, met his eyes. He was smiling. But not at you. Past you. At someone else who'd been watching it all unfold. You bowed, of course. That's all you can do. Bow and memorize the pattern of the floor tiles until the heat in your cheeks passes. You never complained, because there's nowhere to complain to. Complaining is not a currency here. It's an invitation to disappear. You start to understand that there's a hierarchy within the hierarchy, one based not on title, but on social fluency. The ability to say the right nothing at the right moment. To deliver a perfectly neutral "ah" that translates to "you've made a mistake and everyone saw." Some concubines are masters of this art. Their every phrase is a net. Their compliments are booby-trapped. Their silences are lectures. One bows to you a little too deeply. It should be a sign of respect. Instead, it's a reminder that you're being mocked with your own status. You return the bow, but lower. A loss, but a graceful one. Losing with dignity is practically a survival tactic in the lower tiers. Eventually, you're invited to a tea ceremony hosted by the Empress's attendants. Not the Empress herself, of course. You're not important enough to be in her presence unless she's in a particularly theatrical mood. But her ladies-in-waiting are powerful and terrifying. You sit among 8 other concubines. Everyone is silent. Not because they're calm, but because everyone is calculating. Posture, eye contact, hand placement, teacup angle. Even your exhale can shift someone's rank, if the right person finds it too casual. The tea is served. You lift your cup with the correct grip. Index finger bent, eyes lowered, sip softly. Just enough to make sound, but not enough to suggest thirst. And then the question comes. Simple, innocent. What virtues do you admire most in your fellow companions? You blink. That's a trap. You know it, everyone knows it. Name someone too high, and you seem like a social climber. Name someone too low, and it's condescending. Hesitate, and it's worse. You answer with a nod toward Wren. His clarity, you say. Even his stillness has intention. There's a pause. A few eyes flicker. Wren smiles without showing teeth. You don't know if that was a win or the beginning of a new problem. No one brings it up again. That's how you know it mattered. Later that night, there's a knock on your door. No words, just a scroll slid across the floor. Inside, a single pressed plum blossom. No note, no seal, no signature. A message from someone in your rank tier. Or maybe just above it. You stare at the blossom. You don't smile. You put it in a drawer next to the brown stringed sachet. This is how it begins. The slow balancing act. Alliances that form through gestures, through passive-aggressive origami and floral symbolism. You are being invited to play the game. You don't know the rules, but you know the stakes. Eventually, the fear becomes manageable. Not gone, just formatted. You learn to wear it like your robe, folded neatly, tightly belted, sleeves draping at the right angle so it doesn't spill onto your face. You stop jumping when a eunuch calls your name. You no longer flinch when you hear footsteps at your door. Your pulse still surges, but you've trained your face to lie about it. There's a comfort in that, in the routine, the rituals, the predictability of being constantly evaluated, because what's more terrifying than being watched? Being forgotten. And so you begin to lean in, not dangerously, not carelessly, just subtly. You learn how to angle your head so your cheekbones catch the light during formal banquets. You begin to speak less during idle conversation, and somehow that makes people listen more. You smile at the first-rank companion, not warmly, not coldly, just long enough to suggest that you remember your place, but haven't surrendered all your thoughts to it. You start to exist not just beneath the gaze of others, but within it. The strange part is, it works. Your name begins to show up more frequently, on seating scrolls, on gift ledgers, on summons lists for appearances where before you were merely part of the visual background noise. You're offered a newer robe, same colour, slightly richer fabric. A nod from someone you feared. A courtesy from someone you once bowed to too deeply. You're not rising exactly, you're simmering, and the palace loves a slow boil. But here's the trap. As your position begins to stabilise, so too does your dependence on the structure that once suffocated you. You find yourself defending it, silently of course, in your head, but you notice it. When a new concubine forgets to bow during morning review, you feel a jolt of second-hand shame. Less because of his mistake, more because of how it reflects on your tier. When you catch someone using the wrong scent at an event, lotus in late spring, you feel annoyed, not at them, at their incompetence, at how their casualness might pull the whole system slightly off balance. And worse, how their failure makes your obedience look fragile by proximity. You don't speak, but the judgment forms anyway. And that's the moment you realise you're not surviving the hierarchy anymore. You're enforcing it. Not openly, not with cruelty, but with silence. With the kind of silence that lets the walls do their work, that allows the small humiliations to settle without protest, that ensures someone else takes the fall while you maintain your balance. You tell yourself it's necessary, because it is. One misstep and you're gone, not punished. Just reassigned, erased. And you've come too far for that. You've learned too much, endured too long. But deep down, in a part of you that's growing dimmer by the day, you know what's happening. You're not the same boy who arrived here, the one who trembled at footfall, who mourned the loss of his name, who flinched at being touched. That boy is still inside you, but now he watches from behind your eyes, quietly appalled as you accept the structure like a second skin. He watches when you nod at a cruel comment, just to stay aligned with power. He watches when you bow half an inch less deeply to the newcomers. He watches as you begin to measure yourself not in memories, but in privileges. How many layers your robe has, how many petals your tea contains, whether your candle is scented, how close your pillow is to the silk wall scroll. These things matter now, not because they should, because they do. And still, the hierarchy remains unstable. It shifts, it breathes. One concubine falls ill and is gone within a week, no explanation. His room is aired out, his belongings divided. You inherit a hairpin, it's beautiful, slightly chipped. You hide it in a drawer. You hear rumours that he was removed because he was asking questions, or because he cried in front of the wrong attendant, or because he was seen talking too long to the Empress's cousin. No one knows, but everyone pretends to. That's how control works here. It doesn't need to punish everyone. It only needs to punish someone publicly every now and then, so the rest of you volunteer your obedience out of a polite, panicked silence. You catch yourself once, mid-thought, wondering whose removal might benefit you. Whose seat, if emptied, might push yours slightly forward. You hate the thought, but you don't forget it. One day, during a seasonal recitation, you're asked to perform. It's unexpected. Your name is called. You rise, bow, approach the front of the room. The text is handed to you, poetry from a past dynasty. Nothing dramatic, just a soft lament about plum blossoms and exile. Your hands don't shake. You read slowly, carefully, just enough emotion to stir attention, not challenge it. When you finish, there's a pause, then a few nods, a few more than expected. That night, a plate of dried persimmons appears in your room. Expensive, imported, rare. There is no note. You eat one slowly. The rest you do not touch. You let them sit on the tray for days, until they darken, shrivel, until they look like something holy and spoiled at once. They smell like pride or guilt. It's hard to tell anymore. And so the weeks pass. Your posture sharpens. Your silences deepen. Your smiles curve just enough to hold up 1,000 years of court tradition. You are climbing. But what you're climbing is not a ladder. It's a spiral staircase. Polished, circular, and you can no longer remember whether it's leading you up or back to where you started. The palace does not run on rules. It runs on belief. Belief in virtue, in hierarchy, in fate, in the emperor's divine right to orchestrate beauty and cruelty with the same hand, as though both were different shades of heaven. From the outside, the Forbidden City looks like a place of governance, but inside it functions more like a temple, with rituals disguised as protocol, and obedience treated as enlightenment. You begin to feel this shift within the first month. At first, everything seems practical, posture, etiquette, language, but slowly those practicalities start sounding like philosophy. You're told that stillness is not just discipline, it's harmony. That silence is not submission, it's wisdom. That suffering is not misfortune, it's cultivation. And before you can raise a single skeptical eyebrow, those ideas settle into you. Not because you believe them, but because everyone around you does. And belief is contagious. You're taught calligraphy, not to communicate, but to express inner character. Which is strange, since you're forbidden to write anything personal. You're instructed to learn poetry, not for beauty's sake, but because those who suffer must learn to suffer gracefully. You memorize the words of long-dead sages, who spoke in metaphors so dense they might as well be puzzles. Phrases like, "The pearl rests beneath still water," "Stir it and you find only mud," which in practice translates to, "Don't speak out of turn unless you'd like to be repositioned near the courtyard drain." There are ceremonies for everything. Some are grand, seasonal rites, birthdays, lunar blessings. Others are intimate, the placement of teacups, the folding of robes, the order in which a screen is slid open. But none of them are optional. You attend a hand-washing ritual once, led by a court priest in embroidered robes that look heavier than sin. He recites a prayer while pouring water over your fingers, not to cleanse them, to balance them, to realign your spiritual flow, which, judging by his tone, is currently flowing directly into disgrace. You don't ask what that means. You just nod, gratefully, because here, spiritual health is indistinguishable from political stability. You're expected to read omens, to understand that if a raven lands near your window, your fortune is under question. If a branch falls in your path, your ancestors are warning you. If a tea leaf floats upright, you are favoured. If a scroll arrives late, you are not. Your dreams are interpreted by a eunuch who has never smiled and speaks like he's narrating his own autopsy. You dream once of a broken bridge and rising water. He listens carefully, then tells you to burn one of your letters. You haven't written any. He says, then burn the idea of one. You burn a scrap of rice paper. You don't sleep the next night, not because you're afraid, because you're starting to believe him. Every hallway in the palace has its own myth. This one was blessed by a monk who fasted for 90 days. That one was cursed after a minister collapsed during the rain. You start to walk differently in certain spaces. Slower. Head down, breath measured. Not for safety, out of respect. You pass beneath a painted arch that said to protect the pure of heart. You hold your breath, not because you think you're impure, but because you're not sure anymore. You've learned how to bow to gods you don't even think you believe in. There is a room in the palace called the Hall of Heavenly Stillness. You're summoned there once a month for moral instruction, not from a person, from a text. You sit in a circle surrounded by others from your rank, as a eunuch recites from the Book of Conduct for male attendants, a collection of aphorisms written by someone who clearly hated joy. Each line is followed by a pause. You're expected to reflect, and you do. Not because you agree, because reflection is mandatory. A soft voice is the mirror of a soft heart. To crave attention is to lose favour. The most useful ornament is the one that never falls out of place. You commit these to memory. You hear them whispered in your sleep. Not by choice. They've replaced your inner voice with something quieter and far more dangerous. Your fellow concubines don't question the belief structure. Not out loud. But sometimes, when no one's watching, you catch the flicker of doubt. In the way someone stays too long at the moon gate, or fingers their robe like they're trying to remember a time before it was laced with metaphor. But even doubt here is ritualized. It's folded into poems, disguised as longing, presented as virtue. One companion writes a verse and shares it during morning reflection. In silence I bloom, unseen by moon or monarch. Still, I do not wilt. Everyone nods. The eunuch smiles. No one says what the poem really means. They don't have to. You attend a lecture once from a senior tutor in the Department of Inner Harmony. He speaks for 2 hours about the moral architecture of restraint. He explains that every unspoken word is a gesture of dignity, that even blinking too often is a sign of unruly thought, that the best concubine is the one whose presence leaves no ripples. By the end, your spine aches from sitting so still. You thank him, bow low. Later that evening, you stare at your reflection and wonder if your eyes blink evenly enough. You practice. Once, twice. You stop. You decide not to blink at all for 1 full minute. Then you laugh, quietly, not out loud. You catch yourself. You remember, laughter must be contained. Like incense, like grief, like doubt. Everything is spiritual here. Everything is symbolic. And the symbols are dangerous things when wielded by people who believe too deeply. Or not deeply enough. You're not sure which one you are anymore. There is a wall scroll in your chamber. It was there when you arrived. Painted ink on aged silk. A pine tree. A mountain slope. A small red sun rising over the edge. At first, it seemed decorative. Beautiful but simple. Something for the eye to rest on, while your mind unravelled under embroidered ceilings. Then a eunuch mentioned that it was based on a poem about stillness in the face of correction. You nodded politely. Later, you stared at it for an hour. Now you see it every day, not just as decor, as a message, a philosophy, a warning. It whispers while you dress, while you sip tea, while you kneel for instruction. Be still, grow roots, survive winter. Don't rise too fast. You never asked for this philosophy, but it's inside you now, like the incense that clings to your robe, like the etiquette that lives in your spine. Belief in the palace is not something you're asked to declare. That would be inelegant. It's something you are trained to absorb. You start hearing the mantras in places no one says them. A cracked bowl. Even broken things hold form. A long silence at a gathering. The virtuous speak only when silence is complete. An older concubine limping from a fall. The body fails. The role endures. None of this is written down. It doesn't need to be. You've heard it so often, you begin to generate it yourself. Like a virus that teaches its host how to replicate it. You find yourself reciting prayers in your head before meals, not because anyone told you to, because your hands feel wrong when you don't. You catch yourself bowing before opening your own door. You retie your robe 3 times, not for neatness, but because the first knot didn't feel proper. You no longer know if that's ritual or compulsion, but you don't question it, because questioning things here is impolite. The palace doesn't like questions. It likes posture. It likes phrases with no clear meaning but perfect calligraphy. It likes words like serenity, balance, harmony, duty, all soft, all crushing, and all embroidered, painted, and chanted into you until they feel like your own thoughts. You're given a new jade comb. It arrives in a box made of cedar, wrapped in silk. No note. It's an honour, apparently, one reserved for those whose presentation has become quietly inspiring. You thank the eunuch. You bow. You smile. You don't ask who sent it. You don't need to. The comb isn't just a grooming tool, it's a signal. It says you are being watched. That your compliance has become beautiful. That someone, somewhere, wants to encourage your progress. Not your happiness, not your freedom, your progress. You place it on your desk, beside the brush, and the scrolls you're not allowed to annotate. And that night, when you brush your hair, you feel something strange. Not pride, something quieter. Something like belonging. That's when you realise the palace doesn't just want your obedience, it wants your affection. And worse, it might be getting it. You have begun to like the rituals. You find comfort in the repetition, safety in knowing your place. You no longer flinch when corrected. You bow deeper. Thank the instructor for their insight. You take notes afterward, not because you want to improve, because you want to internalise. And once you've internalised it, you want to model it for others. You offer subtle corrections to newer companions. Soft words, a smile, a gentle restatement of how the tea should be poured, or the robe folded, or the scroll unrolled from left to right. They thank you, they bow, and you feel something bloom in your chest. Not joy, not pride, usefulness. The most addictive feeling in the Forbidden City. Because out there, beyond the walls, you are replaceable. Just another son, another burden, another pretty face in a town too poor to remember your birthday. But here, inside these red walls and golden thresholds, you are visible. You matter. Because you've shaped yourself into something the palace can use. And for a moment, that feels like meaning. But meaning comes with a cost. You begin to lose track of your own voice. Not just metaphorically, literally. Your tone has changed. Your words are slower, more deliberate. Your pitch is soft, but not timid. You have learned how to hover in a conversation, never assert, always suggest. You do not laugh unless cued. You do not ask unless asked. You do not speak unless there is space prepared for your voice. And when you catch your reflection speaking, you do not recognise the mouth that moves. There's a festival coming, the double ninth, a celebration of longevity and filial piety. You are selected to participate in a small offering, arranging chrysanthemums near the inner shrine. A privilege. You bow, you accept, you kneel for your assignment. And as you place the flowers, yellow, white, pale green, you remember a time you celebrated this festival as a child. Not here, not in silence, but in a field, barefoot, helping your older cousin light paper lanterns while your mother sang off key and your uncle overcooked the duck. The memory feels fictional now, like a story someone once told you. You pause, fingers hovering over a chrysanthemum stem. The petals are curling, not dying, just softening. You place it anyway. You bow. You return to your quarters. You eat your meal in silence, like always. You recite the prayer of contentment before bed, like always. You arrange your robe, your comb, your posture, like always. But something sits in your chest. Not pain, not sorrow. Something worse. A memory you're no longer sure is real. Because you've said the mantra so many times, they've started to replace your past. Because you've believed so deeply in stillness, you've stopped noticing the parts of yourself that once wanted to move. Because you've been told over and over again that identity is a distraction. And now you finally understand. They weren't training you to follow. They were training you to forget you ever had anything else to follow. You reach a point where nothing surprises you. Not the rituals, not the silence, not the weight of meaning packed into a single glance, or the careful choreography of a tea tray passed from one servant's hands to yours without a word. Your day is no longer structured around tasks. It is structured around perceived alignment. That is to say, the palace doesn't care if you are truly devout. It only cares that you behave as if you are. And over time, that line blurs. You bow to the altar, not because you believe in the altar, but because you believe in the world that believes in it. And that's enough. You've stopped distinguishing between the things you do and the reasons you do them. You no longer question whether the soft robes, the incense rituals, the constant echoes of phrases like empty vessel, fulfilled role are meaningful or hollow. They feel real because they are routine, and that's what belief becomes here. The thing that keeps happening, uninterrupted, until even your doubt has a script. There's a ceremony one evening, a small one, not public. A moon blessing held by the inner garden, attended only by mid-rank concubines and 2 officials from the Department of Tranquil Aesthetics. You go because you're told to. You wear a pale robe. You light a lantern. You recite a verse. You kneel with your eyes open while others chant. And at some point, just for a moment, you feel something, not spiritual, not divine, something settled, like a heavy curtain falling gently over your mind, like exhaling after holding in a breath you forgot you were keeping. It's not joy, it's not peace, it's something simpler, a kind of silence so deep it begins to feel sacred. Afterward, someone compliments your stillness. You thank them. You don't say that you weren't trying. You were just empty. An emptiness here is rewarded. Later that night, You think back to a phrase you were once made to memorize, weeks ago, maybe months. Time is harder now. He who empties himself of longing shall be filled with order. At the time, it sounded poetic, maybe manipulative. Now it sounds comfortable, like a diagnosis you're finally ready to accept. You find yourself reading the Book of Conduct at night, unprompted, not aloud, just to yourself. You turn the silk pages gently, running your fingers over the hand-drawn characters like they might reveal something new. They don't, but you like the way they sit on the page, like they belong there, like they know what you've given up to be part of this world. Belief here isn't about truth, it's about placement. Things have a place. You have a place. Even if you can no longer feel it with your fingertips, you know where you're allowed to stand, where you're expected to kneel, which gaze to hold and which to avoid. This certainty is its own comfort. You once thought freedom meant movement, choice, volume. Now you understand that in this place, freedom is quiet. It's the freedom to not make decisions, to let ceremony take over, to stop explaining yourself, even in your own head. That's the terrifying beauty of belief in the palace. It doesn't demand love, only surrender. And once you surrender, it rewards you, not with joy, but with simplicity. No more choices, no more questioning, just obedience dressed up as peace. Yet you stop missing your past, not because you've healed, because your past has become irrelevant. It doesn't belong here. It doesn't know how to bow. It speaks too loudly. Its robes are the wrong shape. Its metaphors are too coarse. Its laughter doesn't match the decor. And so, little by little, it fades, like steam from a morning basin. You once had memories of a river, a song, a voice you trusted. You remember none of it now. You replaced them with incense and scripture and ritualized stillness. Not because you were forced, because you were taught how to need it. That's the cruel genius of belief in the Forbidden City. It never breaks you. It trains you to break yourself, gently, beautifully, ceremonially, until all that's left is a version of you that fits the scroll, fits the prayer, fits the robe. You become so elegant in your silence that even your sorrow begins to seem refined. And sorrow, real sorrow, is no longer necessary. Because the belief system doesn't erase emotion. It sedates it. It turns grief into poetry, turns longing into ritual, turns confusion into a parable. There is a concubine named Wei. You rarely speak. But once, during an afternoon tea, he turned to you and whispered, "Do you think the gods remember who we were before we started pretending to be holy?" You said nothing, not because you were afraid, because you didn't know, and you still don't. All you know is this: you sleep better now. Not deeply, but evenly. You no longer wake in the middle of the night unsure of who you are. You know exactly who you are. You are the man in the robe, the one who kneels just so, who folds his hands like the temple taught, who believes because there's nothing left to disbelieve in. And belief in the end is just silence with a crown on it. At a certain point, the palace stops being beautiful. It doesn't get ugly exactly. It stays symmetrical. It stays clean. The curtains still flow. The jade still gleams. The koi still swim in those impossible little spirals like they've never known suffering. But something changes. The loveliness starts to feel dangerous. You begin to see the horror behind the softness. How everything is built to hide discomfort under aesthetics. How pain is managed with embroidery. How absurdity is softened by silk. Take the laughing room. That's not its real name. It doesn't have one. But every so often, a concubine is brought there. And from inside, you hear laughter. Perfect, rhythmic, quiet laughter. Like wind chimes. The first time you thought they were telling jokes. Then you noticed the attendants who came out afterward, silent, pale, straight-backed in a way that didn't look natural. You asked nothing. That was the right choice. Later, you learned that the room is used for rebalancing emotional discord. In practice, it means you sit on a cushion while two spiritual counselors recite proverbs until your laughter aligns with the rhythm of balance. If it doesn't, they help you find it, with time, with repetition, with reminders. One concubine emerged after 3 hours. He never laughed again. The absurdity isn't loud here, it's gentle, polished, benevolent. The way a cage might be lovingly waxed before the door is locked. There's a ritual called petal recollection. It sounds poetic. It's not. You and 9 others are placed in a circle. You're handed a dried flower. You're told to remember the blooming moment. You must then describe that moment in reverse, backward, until the flower is once again a bud in your mind. It's not optional. You're told it builds humility. One of the newer concubines once described a petal with too much joy. He said, "It smelled like the garden at home." A moment later, a eunuch tapped his shoulder. That boy now serves in the outer kitchens. Not demoted, not disgraced, just gently relocated. The flower, by the way, didn't smell like anything. You know, you checked. There's a phrase used often here. Let absurdity be your teacher. At first, you thought it was metaphorical. Then came the fruit rotation ceremony. You didn't believe it when you heard. You thought it was a joke. It wasn't. Once a season, the concubines are summoned to the main courtyard. A display of imperial fruit is placed on an elevated platform. Pineapple, pomegranate, persimmon, lychee, things too expensive to touch, let alone eat. Each fruit must be gently rotated clockwise, one at a time with both hands, while reciting the phrase, "Let bounty revolve without excess." It takes hours. No one knows why it's done. Some say it's a fertility rite. Others say it was created by a mad emperor with a fruit obsession. Others, yourself included, believe it's a test, not of obedience, of endurance, because nothing breaks the human spirit like being forced to pretend a papaya has cosmic meaning for 4 consecutive hours while wearing brocade and a facial expression known only as quietly reverent. Afterwards, you're given a slice of melon. It tastes like regret. You once tried to question a ritual, softly, during a private moment. You asked, "Is there a purpose?" The response came instantly. "What is purpose if not what continues?" You nodded. That was the right choice. You begin to notice other absurdities, tiny ones. A forbidden word that no one says, even though no one remembers why. A painting in the North Hall that must never be dusted directly. A rule about not drinking tea while facing west on even-numbered days. None of it is written, it's just understood. Because here, meaning isn't fixed, it's floated. Like incense. You don't follow logic, you follow scent. There's a superstition that if you dream of falling peaches, you must wear yellow for 3 days to prevent disgrace. Someone once dreamt of a banana. The entire ranking system had to pause while the Department of Interpretive Harmony debated its classification. In the end, they ruled banana as an uncertain omen. That concubine now only eats rice. No fruit. Safer that way. It would be funny if it wasn't happening every single day. The horror isn't that you're trapped. It's that you're adapting. You don't laugh anymore when you see someone kneel to a lantern because they thought it looked judgmental. You bow to your own bed sheets before lying down, just in case. You once apologised to a door frame. The worst part? It felt natural. That's the genius of it. The palace doesn't punish you with overt brutality. It drowns you in meaningless precision until you beg for instruction, until you find peace in the arbitrary, until the absurd feels like the only thing that makes sense. There's a new concubine. He's young, sharp-chinned, too pretty for his own good. He arrives with a kind of open-eyed curiosity that can only be described as suicidal. He asks questions, smiles at eunuchs, wears his robe with one side slightly open, like he hasn't yet learned that in this place, exposed skin is a political statement. You all notice him. You do nothing, because you remember what it was like to be him. To walk through these red gates, thinking the world was still governed by cause and effect, by reason, by decency. You give him 3 days. He doesn't last 4. It's not that anything happens, not outwardly, he just adjusts. The light dims in his face. His robe tightens. He stops smiling at no one in particular. He begins to repeat the little mantras. Stillness is grace. The body is the scroll, the spirit, the brush. Harmony requires angles. Soon he blends in. And that's when you realise this place doesn't punish rebellion. It absorbs it. Like silk absorbs wine. No stains, just deeper colour. You once witnessed a purification rite. They called it a draping ceremony. Nothing dramatic. 10 concubines, yourself included, lined up in front of a silk veil. You're each told to step forward, recite a virtue, and then have the veil lowered over your body from above, slowly, silently. By the end you are draped head to toe in translucent fabric. You cannot see clearly. You cannot speak. You must stand perfectly still for 15 minutes. Why? Because you are told this mirrors the silence of the Emperor's thoughts. You try not to laugh. You don't succeed. A single huff of air escapes your nose. Just one. Afterward, you're reassigned to incense grinding for a week. You say nothing. You learn to breathe more politely. Another ritual. The unrolling of the mirror. Not an actual mirror. A metaphorical one. A floor scroll, 20 feet long, depicting the ideal male form, as envisioned by a long-dead philosopher who, judging by the anatomy, had never seen a human body in his life. You are required to kneel before it. Name one flaw in yourself. One virtue you wish to emulate. One boy says, I wish to carry stillness in my brow. Another says, I wish to blink with less intention. You say, I wish to become less legible. The priest nods. You don't know if it was the right answer, but you're allowed to leave. There are prayers for noticing a cloud, instructions for accepting the silence of spoons. There is an entire protocol for how to look pensive without appearing critical. You master it. Your reward. You are invited to observe the burning of the unasked questions. This is exactly what it sounds like. Concubines write down questions they will never ask, place them in a bronze basin, and watch them burn. The ash is swept away by eunuchs who wear no shoes. The fire is not hot. The flames are not bright. Everything about the ceremony is decorous, as if doubt itself must be cleaned before being destroyed. You write, why do I still remember my real name? What happens to the men who vanish? Why does everyone pretend not to hear the birds when they fly overhead? Your paper doesn't burn completely. A corner of it remains, singed but legible. You do not point it out. Neither does anyone else. But the next day, your robe has been replaced with one slightly less ornate. A reminder. Absurdity here is not random. It's targeted. Every ritual, every chant, every inexplicable rule, it all has a single function: to extract compliance without resistance. And it works. You stop writing letters in your head. You stop counting the days. You stop missing outside sounds. You start leaning into the absurdity. There's a relief in it, in surrendering your logic, in folding yourself so perfectly into the puzzle that your corners disappear. You develop a fondness for nonsense. You begin to enjoy the offering of the empty bowl, a ritual where you pretend to eat an invisible meal and thank the emperor for the nourishment of restraint. You bow before doors. You hum at plants. You whisper apologies to the moon when you accidentally step in its reflection. And none of it feels strange, because strangeness requires contrast, and contrast has been outlawed. One night you pass the Hall of Gentle Corrections. It's quiet, too quiet. You pause. Inside you see a single candle, a concubine kneeling, eyes closed, palms up, a priest hovering behind him, murmuring verses about inner balance and the correction of subtle noise. The concubine is still. But you swear, you see his jaw twitch. Just once. The next day he's gone. No announcement, no relocation, just silence. And the candle from the hall is placed in the centre of the library, in honour of renewed clarity. You bow when you pass it, because that's what you do now. Not because you're afraid, because anything else would be impolite. Eventually, you stop waiting for things to make sense. Not because you're tired of asking, because you've finally understood. Sense is not the point. Sense suggests logic, progress, debate, cause and effect. But here, within these lacquered walls and unblinking scrolls, meaning isn't designed to be found. It's designed to contain you. And once you're fully contained, groomed, oiled, balanced, compliant, the palace doesn't ask you to understand it anymore. It begins to ask you to perform it. You become part of the absurdity, not a victim of it, a contributor. It begins with your smile. You don't know when you started doing it, smiling, ever so gently, whenever someone passes you in the hallway. A half smile, a breath of warmth. Nothing sincere. Nothing demanding. It's part of the aesthetic now. Then come the rituals you're asked to lead. Simple things at first. You're chosen to present the first steam at morning incense. A warm towel passed from hand to hand before disappearing without explanation. Then you're asked to recite the poem of graceful distance during a posture inspection. You don't ask why posture must be inspected at sunrise. You just bow and begin. You learn that there are 7 official states of kneeling. You learn all of them. You can now distinguish between prayerful submission and ceremonial regret just by the angle of a kneecap. You start correcting others, not harshly, gently, with compassion, because you believe genuinely that someone could damage their spiritual symmetry by bowing 2 degrees too low on an odd-numbered day. You're no longer surviving the palace, you're maintaining it. One day, an attendant asks you to approve a seating chart for an event called the Feast of Unnamed Silence. You've never heard of it, but you nod. The name doesn't confuse you. You suggest a new cushion pattern for the 5th rank tier to better reflect their humble translucence. The eunuch thanks you. That night, you find a scroll outside your door. 3 words. You are becoming. You don't know who wrote it. You don't care. You pin it to the wall beside your robe. It feels deserved. Your dreams become strange, but softly so. You dream of feathers arranged into patterns no bird could survive. You dream of a teacup that speaks in riddles only your elbows understand. You dream of your own face, bowing to a larger version of your face, while music plays from beneath the floor. You wake calmly. The dreams make more sense than reality. That's how you know you've adjusted. A new rite is introduced, the circling of the inner spoon. You are chosen to perform it. You are not told what it means, only that you must walk around a spoon placed on a red pillow 13 times while reciting a passage from the Record of Untouched Things. You do, and it's beautiful. You weep once during the 9th circle, not because you're sad, because you're in sync. Others watch, some weep with you. You're commended for your alignment with unspoken geometry. You're told your eyes look particularly spiritual. You thank them. The spoon ceremony becomes a seasonal rite. No one questions it. One concubine does, once, softly, half a joke. Will we circle Forks next? He is reassigned to outer garden maintenance within the hour. You visit him once, by accident. He's raking gravel into spirals, over and over, in absolute silence. You try to speak. He does not look up. He no longer blinks evenly. You leave before you forget how to bow. Later, you're invited to contribute to the Book of Partial Answers, a compilation of philosophical responses designed to be both wise and incomplete. You submit a phrase. The candle knows more than the flame. It is accepted. Copied onto silk. Hung in a meditation room. You see someone kneeling before it days later, mouth trembling. You feel proud, then uneasy, then proud again. Your robe is upgraded. 2 more layers. Softer thread. You fold yourself into it like a secret. One night, you catch your reflection moving slightly before you do. You don't react. It corrects itself. You bow. It bows back. This is fine. There's a new morning chant now. It begins. I am not my voice. I am the echo that remains after others have spoken. You speak it aloud. You mean it. You no longer remember how to walk without intention. Every step is framed. Every pause is theatrical. Even when you're alone. Especially when you're alone. Because alone is when the palace is watching hardest. Not with eyes. With memory. With protocol. You know that now. Once you tripped. Not badly. Just a misstep in a garden. You looked around. No one saw. But the next morning your comb had been replaced with one slightly less symmetrical. That was months ago. You haven't tripped since. Sometimes you wonder, what if the rituals are meaningless? What if the chants are hollow? What if this entire palace is just a fever dream built on centuries of beautifully maintained nonsense? But then you think, does it matter? You eat. You sleep. You are seen. You are needed. You are becoming a shape that fits. And in a world built entirely on ceremony, being useful is the only truth that lasts. It begins with the broom closet. You weren't supposed to see it. You were retrieving a scroll case from the west corridor when a door opened too quickly, and for a brief moment you caught sight of something forbidden. It wasn't scandalous. It wasn't even out of place. It was just real. Inside the closet, a chipped bucket, a bent ladle, an old rag that smelled like vinegar and ash. There was a nail sticking out of the wall, and something about that nail, small, rusted, unnoticed, stuck with you longer than the last 5 incense meditations combined. The nail was wrong, and in a palace where wrongness is a myth wrapped in gold foil that made it sacred. You looked for the broom closet again the next day. It had been locked. That was the first moment you felt it. Not sorrow, not fear. Hollowness. The kind that feels like a cough building in a silent room. Later that afternoon, During brush review, your stroke spacing is slightly uneven. Not incorrect, just loose. The attending eunuch gives a pause that lasts 3 seconds too long. You are told, quietly, that you will attend gesture correction at sunrise. No one says what that is. You arrive at the pavilion as the sky begins to unbutton its darkness. You're alone. Then an instructor arrives. No words, just nods. You're told to hold a small silver bell between your knuckles, then to pour water from one porcelain cup to another without ringing it. It takes 4 hours, no breaks. If the bell rings, you start again. Your hands are trembling by the end. You're told, good. Trembling is the body remembering where it failed. You bow. You walk back slowly. Your robe is soaked through at the cuffs. At breakfast, you're served rice gruel. Same as always. But this time, it tastes like abandonment. Not because it changed, because you did. By midweek, everything in the palace starts feeling louder. The soft shh of slippered feet on stone. The snap of a scroll being opened. The plink of a comb dropped by accident, and the immediate crushing stillness that follows as no one dares move. You spend too long arranging your tea leaf into a pattern before pouring. Someone notices. They ask if you are composing poetry. You nod. You're not. You're just stalling, trying to make the day feel less scripted by rearranging leaves in a cup you no longer enjoy. That night, during pillow folding, your fingers hesitate. You've folded your pillow the same way for 3 years. Right corner over, left edge tucked, crease pressed with the flat of your palm. 1 breath, 2, bow. Tonight, your palm lifts early. It ruins the rhythm. You refold it 6 times. Each time, the breath is wrong. You want to scream, but you don't. Instead, you open the window half an inch and listen for anything outside the walls. Wind, dogs, even footsteps, anything uncurated. There's nothing, just the ever-present hum of civilization pretending it isn't dying under its own decorum. By now, you've stopped writing verses. You still pretend to. You dip the brush in ink. Let it hover above the page. Let it drip. Let the drops scatter across the rice paper like thoughts you're not allowed to have. 1 drop lands on your robe. You stare at it like it might confess something. You used to fear punishment. Now you just want someone to notice. You begin spending more time in the second garden. It's less popular. The fish are duller there. The stone bench is cracked. You like it. You sit with your hands folded wrong on purpose. No one corrects you. That's worse. When you return, someone has arranged your bedding in the style of a different rank. Higher. You're not sure what that means. No one tells you. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe it's a warning. Maybe it's grace being offered at the exact moment you no longer care if you're favoured. At lunch, your bowl is served second instead of third. You stare at the steam rising from the surface and realise you have no desire to eat, not from sorrow, not from control, but because taste itself has become irrelevant. Everything tastes like silence now. Even sweetness, even salt. That evening, during Sky Appreciation Hour, you lie flat on the observation mat and say nothing. You watch the stars. You're supposed to recite constellations in order. You forget one. You say the hanging lanterns instead of the emperor's net. No one laughs. No one scolds. Someone coughs. The moment passes. And in that moment you realise you are vanishing, not all at once, but one ritual at a time, one correction at a time, one perfectly measured exhale after another, until you no longer remember what your breath sounds like when it isn't being supervised. It's the third morning in a row you forget the order of the corridors. You're walking from the courtyard of soft water to the west wing for ceremonial posture drills. You've done this hundreds of times. The route should be effortless. But today your feet carry you to the covered arcade that leads nowhere, to the locked gate with the red tassel that's always untied. You stop. You adjust. You walk quickly, hoping no one saw. Your slipper skids slightly on the stone tile. A eunuch appears from behind a pillar. Says nothing, just writes something down on a thin slip of bamboo. You bow twice. He doesn't nod back. He simply walks away. The next morning, you're reassigned lantern duty. It isn't punishment, but it isn't honour either. It's neutral. A subtle kind of demotion. The kind that tells you someone saw. You begin waking earlier than you're required to, partly because your back aches from the mattress, mostly because lying in bed makes the silence feel too heavy on your chest. You sit. You fold your sleeping robe. You stare at the line where the wall meets the floor, until the bell for pre-dawn tea. Your slippers make less sound now. You've started walking with the heel of your foot lifted slightly, unconsciously. On the second day of lantern duty, your task is to trim the wicks. 18 oil lanterns lined along the northeast corridor between the reflection room and the ink storage hall. You kneel beside each one, snuff the flame, snip the wick precisely 1 knuckle in length, re-oil the bowl, then relight. You don't speak. You aren't spoken to. On lantern number 9, you realise the oil has run dry in your gourd flask. You rise, carry the empty flask back to the utility alcove, wait in line behind a servant refilling vinegar for floor polishing, then return. Lanterns 10 through 13 flicker slightly when lit. You wait. They stabilise. You kneel again. You repeat the prayer for inner clarity. You recite it twice, slowly. Not for devotion, for time. Anything that stretches the moment. By the 15th lantern, your knees have started to throb. You pause for a half-second longer than you're permitted. You notice it. So does the boy assigned to wall dusting on the opposite side. He glances over just once. No words, just the glance. That's enough. Later that night, your robe has been pressed to a tighter fold than usual. That's the correction. Subtle. Physical. No comment required. You sleep with a crease digging into your shoulder. That same week, during afternoon scroll arrangement, you fumble the order. Not fully, just a small mistake. You place a poetry scroll in the ceremonial verse section, rather than aesthetic philosophy. It's corrected immediately, no scolding, just a change of tone in the page-turning rhythm. Someone else takes over your row. You're asked to supervise candle spacing instead. You adjust wicks, you bow, you keep your eyes on the floor. Someone clears their throat behind you. You straighten your spine. That night, you are not summoned for recitation. No explanation. You sit in your chamber, still, upright. You do not touch the plum rice cakes brought on a tray. The servant retrieves them silently 2 hours later. He does not look at you. No one looks at you as often anymore. During the next posture session, you're paired with a boy who hasn't spoken aloud since his 2nd season. You know nothing about him except that he arranges tea like he's trying not to be seen by the cups. He kneels slower than expected. You mirror his pace. You shouldn't. Now your timing is off. Your final bow lands 2 heartbeats behind the gong. Afterward, your shoes are replaced with a version 1 shade lighter. Not white, not ivory, just paler. You stare at them for a long time before putting them on. They fit exactly the same. At dinner, you eat all of your rice, even though the top is slightly scorched. You chew slowly. Your tongue finds a bit of grit. You swallow. No one else speaks. No one else seems to notice. When the conversation finally begins, it is about the way one of the Emperor's cousin's attendants adjusted the flowers by the West Pavilion. The arrangement, they say, resembled grief. This is said with approval. You nod once, only once. You keep your eyes low. You remember how, a year ago, you were the one who noticed things like that. Now you echo other people's observations, and they echo nothing back. The next morning your schedule is empty, not officially, but your name has been left off 2 postings. No calligraphy review. No attendance for outer garden maintenance. You remain in your quarters. You polish your comb. You adjust the coverlet. You water the potted citrus that hasn't grown in months. You recite the morning invocation 4 times. No one checks. You remain inside for 3 more hours. When someone knocks, it's a eunuch with a change of robe. It's the same colour, same stitching, but it's sleeveless. A summer variation. It's not summer. You ask no questions. You bow. Accept it. You wear it. Later that day, as you walk past the viewing pond, a group of lower-tier companions is practicing flute tones. One misplays a note. They stop. Start again. Harmonise. They don't look up when you pass. Even the fish seem to avoid your reflection. The bell rings. Evening prayers. You go. Your name is last on the mat. Your candle is smaller than the rest. You light it carefully. The flame holds. You bow. No one says your name. You no longer expect them to. The changes aren't announced. You just stop being scheduled for shared duties. One day you're not assigned to meal preparation rotation. The next, you're skipped over for robe folding review. Then it's morning calligraphy. Then prayer recitation in position 2 is filled by someone newer, whose voice is uneven and fast. You're not dismissed. You're just unlisted. Your chart remains outside your chamber, blank. No one says why. When a servant delivers your meals, it's no longer a tray with steamed fish and pearl barley. It's plain rice, twice a day, same bowl. No variation. Not punishment. Just simplification. Your robe is cleaned less often. You start washing it yourself, in a basin meant for plants. One morning you drop it. The edge brushes the stone. You check for footprints. There are none. You fold it. You say nothing. No one else says anything either. During courtyard maintenance, you ask a question about tool placement. The boy beside you doesn't answer. He looks toward the supervisor. Waits for permission to speak. The supervisor shakes his head, barely. You're not corrected. You're just ignored. When you pass people now, they lower their gaze in the formal way, not out of deference, but as if to prevent confusion. As if looking at you too long might imply you still have a role. At lunch, the seating mats are laid out as always. You used to sit 6th from the end. Now your mat is closer to the outer edge. It's placed after the folding screen. You kneel. You eat. You stay silent. The rice has a hard grain in it. You chew until it dissolves. 2 days later, you're summoned to assist with the preparation of ceremonial fan tassels. It's not a return to normal duty. You're not working with others. You're placed in a small room beside the incense pantry. The silk threads are already arranged. Your task: attach blue tassels to 21 bamboo fans, using a loop and tie method described in a folded diagram. No one demonstrates. You make 3 errors on the first fan. You undo the knots. Try again. By the 5th fan, your fingers shake from holding the silk too tightly. You finish before nightfall. You leave the fans on a lacquered tray. No one checks your work. They're gone the next morning. You don't know if they were accepted or discarded. You never see them again. You develop a cough. It's dry, shallow, from your throat, not your lungs. You suppress it when others are near. You don't want attention. You just want the day to pass. At night, you drink warm water from a cracked ceramic cup someone left behind 2 seasons ago. You hold the crack toward your mouth carefully, so it doesn't drip. There is no mirror in your chamber. There used to be one. It was removed after the last robe fitting. No explanation. You wash your face by feel. Your hair hangs longer now. No one trims it unless scheduled. You're not scheduled. You twist it behind your neck, using a strip of old cotton from a discarded sleeve. On the 6th morning of week 4, you wake to the sound of a bell you haven't heard before. It's deeper, slower. You rise, dress. You open your door. The hallway is empty. At the far end, a eunuch stands beside a lacquer box the size of a seat cushion. He gestures. You approach. Inside the box are ink blocks and a cloth with writing already half faded. You are instructed to copy the text 24 times onto fresh paper. You ask, "Should I use the lower brush?" The eunuch does not answer. You begin copying. It takes most of the morning. The text is an old moral lesson, something about patience and vessels. You don't read it after the 3rd copy. You just trace. You return the sheets. The box is removed. You are not thanked. That night, a single candle is brought to your chamber. No replacement wax, no oil lamp, just the candle. It burns low before you sleep. You lie down fully clothed. You don't adjust your posture. You wake when the wind shifts through the lattice panels. Your feet are cold. Your slippers are gone. You walk barefoot to the basin. The water is grey from yesterday's robe rinse. You pour a little over your fingers. You dry them on your sleeve. You sit. You wait. No bell comes. No chore. No summons. You wait until dusk. At dinner your bowl is not delivered. You walk to the meal hall. No one stops you. There is no mat with your name. You stand. Eventually, a steward gestures toward the outer bench. You sit. He hands you a steamed bun in wax paper. You chew it slowly. It's sour. You finish it anyway. You return to your chamber. Someone has taken your cushion. You sit on the floor. You breathe. You do not cry. Not because you are proud, because crying would be loud, and you no longer wish to be noticed. You lie down without removing your robe. You place your palm over your chest. You listen to your breath. It is steady. That is the only thing in the palace that still responds when you ask it to do something. The palace does not sleep. Even at night, the walls breathe. Somewhere, a broom brushes stone. Somewhere, silk is being folded into silence. You lie still, your robe slightly askew, one shoulder exposed. No one adjusts it. The oil lamp outside your chamber flickers once, then dims. It was lit for someone else. It wasn't meant for you. Your breath is shallow, not from fear, from habit. A single draught moves across the floor. Cool, dry. You do not shiver. Outside, the lanterns sway. Somewhere down the hall, a bell is rung. Once. Not for you. You do not move. You do not sleep. You simply remain.